Can you hear me now? Okay, there we go. So you can hear me, Kara, Devin. Good, good, good. Okay. So let me start over. Welcome. Since obviously none of that got recorded. We're going to be taking a look at the physical inventory process today. So we're going to be looking specifically at the counting procedures, starting, doing, and wrapping up a count of physical inventory. And by the way, my name is Bill Steppen, in case you didn't know. So, obviously, people are already over on the chat tab, but in case you didn't know and you were wondering how I was talking with people, you can click on the chat tab over to the right, use the nickname button down at the bottom, sign in, say hi, and if you have any questions throughout this session, that's where you will ask them of me. Hello, Joellen. Okay, let me reposition my train of thought. Let's go ahead and switch over to my AIM screen here. Okay, so like I was saying, what we're going to be looking at is the physical inventory counting process. Now, I'm going to be using the drop-down methods. Of course, you can use the on-screen buttons if you like, but the way that this works, I'm going to kind of walk you through an outline of this, and then we'll look at the individual steps. So, all of these options are going to be found in the physical inventory submenu of your inventory module. And we have a flowchart of this available as well on our website and in our online help, so you can check that out as well. But typically you get started by doing what's called a prepare for physical. Then you go and you take your count, either manually or using a handheld data collector. And then you can compare what you counted versus what the computer thought you had. And then you will wrap up your physical inventory count by updating the non-serialized quantities. When it comes to serialized quantities, you'd have to, we'll just kind of take a look at it all. So let's take a look at what we mean by these individual steps. So when we do a prepare for physical, what we're doing is we are telling AIM that we are about to count some or all of your inventory at any of your given store locations. So you'll notice when we come in and prepare for a physical, it's going to do this as of today's date. If you would like, then you can pare this down to certain inventory data subsets. By default, if you leave all of these options as is, then it will count all of your inventory regardless of manufacturer, regardless of location, regardless of category or subcategory. If you want to do a specific subset of your inventory, such as only inventory at a certain location, or only certain categories, or even only certain manufacturers, you can make those types of selections here. In fact, if you have never done a full scale, what I'm calling a full scale physical inventory in AIM before, I recommend doing just a certain subset of your inventory, usually maybe one of your smaller categories, something that's not going to have a whole, a large quantity of inventory to go in and count. So maybe something like, and obviously it's going to differ from one store to another, but in my example, I might go in and I might do vacuums because I don't have a whole heck of a lot of vacuums in my system. In fact, I don't have a whole heck of a lot of anything in this training copy, so I'm not going to make a selection here. But if I wanted to, I could make several selections. I could come in, and you can see as I make selections here, I either can select one at a time, or if I want to do multiples, I take my control key on my keyboard, and you can see that it's actually making multiple selections now of any of these given categories or subcategories. I'm actually going to go ahead and clear those selections. If I make no selections, it does them all. So you don't have to come in and select them all in order to do them all. You can just leave that as is. I'm going to go ahead and proceed with this. And of course, it's going to confirm that I have a backup. If you are not familiar with the backup protocols and procedures, real quick pro tip, those are available in the Admin Utilities menu. There's an option in there called Database Backup. Go in there. It usually takes a few minutes at most, and you don't have to kick everyone out of the system to do it. So by doing that, you can ensure that you have a fresh backup in case something goes completely awry with the physical inventory process and you just want to go back to when you started. I'm going to go ahead and say yes on this. So that has now done what we call a snapshot. What we mean by a snapshot is it has gone in and it's now taken a look at all of the inventory quantities that I have in stock at this moment in time, at whatever time it is, 12 or 1:08 p.m. Central Time on this Tuesday or Thursday, December 16th. The weather threw me off entirely yesterday. So now what does that mean? So it wants to know when you do your count what you have in stock as of that moment in time. We're going to really dive into this next week when we get into protocols. But just so that you can kind of understand what it did, we can go to the maintenance menu, to inventory, and we can go to physical inventory. When we come to this physical inventory system, or this physical inventory option, we can see that, I should have come in here before. There was nothing in here before. In here now, it's basically said, okay, these are the SKUs that you are counting during this physical inventory session. We've got 3 instances of all my SKUs because I did not specify a given location. You can see I've got RT14 here at Dubuque, Iowa City, and Warehouse. And basically, it's basically now keeping track of, did you in fact count this? Notice how if I go through all of these, none of them come up with counted and none of them come up with a quantity counted because I literally just started this process. Now at this point, we would go out and we would do our count. We can do that in one of 2 ways. We can either go around and manually write down the quantities that we are counting, or we can use something like a handheld data collector. A handheld data collector is literally just like a computer in your hand. It doesn't actually have like a connection to AIM. You can purchase them from us here at TriTech, or if you have something that can basically go around and just essentially make a file of SKUs and quantity counts. That's essentially all it really needs to do. But either way, you're going around and you're counting your inventory. Now, to help with this procedure, if you are going to be doing a manual count, you can go and run a report in your inventory report menu underneath the physical menu called Physical Inventory for Manual Count. When you run this, and you can see it's coming up and showing 61 records. I'm going to limit this to just the Dubuque locations so that we don't have a whole mess of duplicates on here. And when you run this report, you have the option of printing the computer quantity. Now, depending on how large of an organization you have and whether or not you trust your counting staff not to shortcut the process, you may or may not want to print the computer quantity. It's a great way to quickly verify that what you counted is what the computer thinks you have. And in fact, I'm going to go ahead and run this with that on. And let me go ahead and just print this to the screen. I'm going to bring this over and we'll just show this on the screen. And of course, it popped up on my other monitor here. Okay. So when we run this this report, you can see it's basically showing the descriptions, manufacturer, model, locator, in case that would be helpful, category and subcategory, price, SKU number, location, and if I did not turn on the computer quantity, this column would not be here. But basically, you can see it's got a space over here suitable for clipping this to a clipboard and then essentially just writing down the counts that you are taking when you're going around and counting these products. Now again, if this is showing here like it is, like I checkmarked the print computer quantity option, if your staff are prone to shortcutting and not actually going through and taking everything off the hook or off the shelf and making sure that the count is correct, you may not want to include that because they may just eyeball it and say, yeah, that looks like 2, and write that down. And of course, that is not helpful at all. So just something to keep in mind. But what you can do is, if you do have this check mark to print, then this makes the next step of keying in these counts a lot more efficient. So when it comes to keying those in, where is my mouse? There it is. Okay. Let's go ahead and close out of this. Come on. Where is my mouse? Come on. Technical difficulties, right? Okay, let me... Are we good? We're just having all kinds of fun here today, aren't we? Okay, I think we're good. This is also the joy of being the sole engineer when you're doing all this stuff. Okay, I think we're good. Let me know if we're not. Okay, hopefully this is all coming through. So, quick wrap up to getting a quick summary up to where we are at this point. We've done a physical inventory snapshot. We've prepared for physical inventory, and we have now gone through and we basically are taking our counts, manually or otherwise. When we are wanting to now key those counts into the system, if you can compare, well, okay. Boy, this thing is just all kinds of wonky. All right. We're going to go through the through here. When you go to key those counts in, you will enter them manually. So when you go to enter them manually, you can see basically it's going to ask for the SKU, and let's just go ahead and say we're putting in RT14, and it's going to ask for the quantity that you counted. Now, if you have counted all of these and you've written them all down on the clipboard, on the printout, you only have to key in the counts where the computer quantity is different. So if I counted 69 of these, great. I don't actually have to key that in. I will take care of that in a step after this. But if my count is off, let's go ahead and say I only counted 68. I want to key that in. Basically, anything where the quantity that you counted is off from the computer quantity, you want to key those counts in. So let's do another one, for example, RT10. What I want to do with this one is pretend I didn't count any. And I still want to come in here. I want to basically put this in as a current count of 0. And you can see as I do this down at the bottom, it's just letting me know what was the last item that I just keyed in and what was the count that I keyed it in at. So that way you don't kind of lose your place as you're going down the list of what you're counting. Now, as you're doing this, let's go ahead and exit out of this. And I want to go back to where I was before. So let's go back to maintenance and inventory and physical inventory. So remember how before it was coming up and it said the check mark for counted was not there and the quantity counted was not there. You can see how it's got that now. Quantity counted 68. Of course, I didn't count them at the Iowa City or warehouse locations. But basically, it's keeping track now of those counts. Now let's go and let's find RT10. Notice how it shows that I counted that, and it shows a 0 because I told it I didn't find any. That is very important. So as you're doing this process, if you're doing a manual count, I'm going to get to those of you who want to do this with an inventory data collector here in just a moment. But after you put in all of your counts, just to kind of shortcut this process, you can go back to physical inventory And you can then, when you've keyed in all of your discrepancy counts, you can then do what's called a default quantity for items not counted. When you do this, and I'm going to do this for just the Dubuque location, and you can see it's popping up here with a pretty severe message. It's saying this should only be run if you've used enter physical count manually. The concept is you only enter discrepancies via that program. Anything left that has not been counted is going to default to the computer quantity. So, as an example, before I hit proceed on this actually, let me do this. Let's go back to inventory, and we'll just bring up inventory as a display. And of course this popped up on a different monitor, so now I gotta go get that. That's the problem, I have too many monitors, right? I don't even know where my mouse is anymore. There it is, okay. Bring this over. Okay. So, let's just do this. I'm gonna hit search. And let's just use RT71 as an example. See how this has a computer count of 13? And in fact, let's just confirm that by going to the details, which again popped up on a different monitor. See how specifically this has a quantity available of 13. That is key. Remember now, I didn't count that. But I'm assuming, I'm going off of my assumption for this session that I did in fact count 13. Remember that. If we go and look at the, it's going to drive me nuts. If we go back and look at the physical inventory routine here for RT71, you can see it says did not count, no computer count. What I'm going to do now is, remember, we pretending that we counted it. We're going to go to the physical inventory menu, and we're going to run default quantity for items not counted for the Dubuque location, and proceed with that. So now, when we take a look at that routine, maintenance, inventory, and physical inventory, and let's look at RT71, see how it now shows counted and quantity of 13? The idea of this is when you count your inventory, hopefully the vast majority of your inventory is correct as far as what you count versus what your discrepancies are. So you would only have to key in the discrepancies, which should be a small fraction of your total counts. By doing that, then when you come and run that default quantity routine, it takes care of the remaining vast majority of your inventory counts. Because if you don't do that step, it's going to assume, oh, I did not count anything. And also, do you remember that I said I didn't find any of the RT10? What it thought I had 10 of, I didn't find any. I needed to make sure that I went in and I put a count of 0, because without doing that, then on the RT10 listing, it would have not assumed that it was counted, and it would have defaulted that back to a counted quantity of 10. So you want to keep that in mind. You want to make sure that if you don't count anything, you put in a 0 when you're doing enter physical count manually. Now, let's go ahead and switch gears, and let's pretend that you were doing it via a data collector. So if we go back to modules and inventory, and the physical inventory menu. And I'm going to apologize right now. I do not have the module that you would use with the LDX10 data collector. In fact, I don't even have one of those on me. Supply chain, right? We've sold them all out. But when you use that data collector to go in and literally scan all of your inventory, it is taking that count for you. So all you have to do then is get the file off of that data collector and pull it into AIM. The way that you do that is you use a special program. I think it's called DC Suite. Again, I apologize. I don't have that on my computer. But after you pull the file off of that, you would use import physical count to come in and basically tell it what location is that count for and what is the file. So you would use find, and then you would go out and you would find that CSV file I think it's a CSV. It's either a CSV or it's a dot text or it's something similar to that, but I'm pretty sure it's a CSV. You pull that in, and then you tell it that it's going to be either a skew in quantity, or if you had programmed it to only count serials, then you would do skew only. And basically for each one that you count, it assumes a quantity of 1. So by doing that and proceeding with that, that replaces the enter physical count manually and the default quantity for items not counted. Either way, you're getting the counts that you took into the system using these procedures. Now, prior to wrapping up your physical inventory, which would be done using the Update Non-Serialized Quantities program, it's a good idea to go in and run a report just to kind of see what's going on with your inventory. So if we go to Inventory and Physical Reports, you can run the Physical Inventory for Review report. When you run this report, you have the option of running this for discrepancies only. You can see when I do that, it's showing me literally just 5 records. And if I switch it to just the Dubuque location, it's just 2. Let's go ahead and run this report, because if you remember, I only keyed in 2 quantities that were off. So those happen to be the RT10 and the RT14. Remember how I put in a count of 68 where the computer thought I had 69? So that is a difference of 1, or -1. And I didn't find any of the RT10s, so that's a difference of -10. Essentially what it's going to do is it's going to go in then, and whatever the current quantity is of those 2 skews, it's going to reduce the counts by that difference. Or if it were a positive difference, it would increase the count of those quantities by that difference. So that's kind of the idea there. Now, there are some other reports that you may find handy at this time. There is a physical inventory counted, but not in inventory. So in other words, if there was something out on the floor that got scanned and basically counted, but it wasn't in that prepare file, that snapshot, this report will highlight those, and you can see when you run that report, it's literally just saying, okay, what location do you want to run this for? The other report that you may find handy is physical inventory not counted. So in other words, what did you go out and, what was on the snapshot that it thought you had in stock, but that you didn't count at all? And this is really best used, in fact, it really can only be used if you're using the handheld data collector. So by using the handheld data collector, it will know, hey, I didn't count that, versus doing the 2 steps, the enter physical count manually and then enter the default quantity for items not counted. You'll notice when I do it for Dubuque, it says no records selected, because literally everything has been flagged as counted. Remember? So keep that in mind when you run that report. But ultimately then, to wrap up with a physical inventory count, you would go to the inventory physical menu, and then you would do an update of non-serialized quantities. So when you do that, it's asking you what store location you're going to do it for. It will alert you if any records have not been counted. If they have not been counted, the whole idea there is regardless of what the computer thinks you have in stock of it, it's going to reset those counts for those SKUs at those locations to 0. Because it says, hey, we didn't find them, so you must not have them. Let's get them to 0. This is especially helpful if you have anything that is sitting at a negative quantity. So it's not imperative, if you were here last week, it's not imperative that you go through and take care of those counts ahead of time, finding all the things that the computer thought you had negative of. But it can be super helpful just so that you don't have any confusion when you get to this last step. Now this is specifically going to update, again, non-serialized inventory, your accessory items. When it comes to anything serialized, it can't just update those, because there's more to serialized inventory than just a count. There's the actual serial numbers. So what you'd want to do in the case of any serial numbers that you counted that weren't in the system is you would need to go in and receive those using the receive inventory module. Modules, inventory, add change, and receive. You would go in and you would actually, what did I do? I clicked on the import. you would go in to receive inventory, and you would go in and you would tell them, okay, this is the serial, or this is the SKU, this is the serial, and you may not have all the details, but at least it would get that serial number into the system. If there were any serials that the computer thought you had that you didn't find, you would need to transfer those out. And that would be done on the transfer menu. So transfer options, and then transfer inventory out. Typically the reason in that case would be lost or stolen, and then you would go in and you would put in your serials, and then you would transfer them out that way. So just kind of keep that in mind when it comes to serials. Otherwise, the final step is to run update non-serialized quantities. When I go ahead and do that, you saw the progress meter there, really quick, just like that. So now when I go back and I look at inventory, let's just do a display inventory at the Dubuque location, and we will see that the RT14, if we scroll down, is now, well, it's got the computer count of 69. If we take a look at the details, we will see that the available quantity is actually at 67 with a quantity out of 1, which if we kind of think about it, technically we have 68 of them because the quantity out of 1 is one that's out there on layaway. So just kind of keep that in mind too. And then we've got one that's sitting there for a special order. And outside of that, the other one, the RT10, right above that, you can see that it's no longer showing that count at all. So hopefully this all made sense, and hopefully it wasn't too hard to follow with the technical difficulties. I do apologize for that. But like I said, next week we are going to wrap up on Tuesday, which is the 20th. It's over here on the protocol page, or the playlist page. We'll follow up with what I'm going to kind of call physical inventory protocols. Essentially just knowing the nuts and bolts of why it does what it does, why it handles the counts the way that it handles them. So we'll take a look at that next week. As far as the schedule for 2022, up at the top of the screen, and don't click on it right now because that'll take you away from this broadcast, but you'll see a poll option. By going there, you can make your submissions for live stream ideas for January and beyond. So definitely go ahead and let me know what you're interested in seeing as far as live stream topics. I always take those into consideration because these live streams are for you. So it doesn't do me any good just to talk things all day long. I want to make sure that the content that I'm giving you is relevant. So definitely let me know what you'd like to see. And in the meantime, we will go ahead and see you next week. And if you don't get a chance to attend next week, I hope you have a very Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year. Otherwise, we'll see you then. And I hope you can make it a good one. Take care.